We are seeing an outright worker uprising right now, so this story is not getting nearly enough press. This is in the Washington Post. Worker protests at airports spread nationwide over staffing and pay. Food service workers in San Francisco go on strike and shut down concessions. Flight attendants plan Tuesday protests at multiple airports. So, they're fed up, man. This article is going to go ahead and get into some specifics about exactly why they're fed up. However bad you think the situation is, it's worse. So, and again, you'll see them. You'll see the specifics. So they say cashiers, baristas, bartenders, cooks, and lounge attendants at San Francisco International Airport launched an open-ended strike Monday over staffing levels and wages, shutting down most of one of the nation's busiest airport's food concessions. So, key concerns here, wages and staffing levels. Now, we'll get into more on this in a little bit, but it wasn't that long ago, we were in the heart of the COVID pandemic, and, a lot of things were shut down, and airports were hit very hard. And what happened in reaction to that was massive government bailout, airports laid off people anyway, and we're still dealing with massive understaffing, even though in terms of travel, we're sort of back to pre-pandemic levels. So it's unsustainable what's going on right now. Flight attendants at United and Southwest Airlines on Tuesday are expected to demonstrate at 21 airports around the United States, including Guam, as well as in London, to draw attention to workplace problems made worse by understaffing. Across the country, flight attendants and airport workers are responding to a hailstorm of workplace issues related to pay and staffing levels. Airline travel during the pandemic recovery has been marred by hundreds of thousands of canceled and delayed flights, attacks on flight attendants, and widespread desperation among airport workers and travelers. So, look, we've talked a lot about this recently, but they're basically committing fraud. The airports are. They have these flights, and they book them, and then they don't have a fucking pilot for the flight. And then you find out the day of, like right when you're about to take your flight. And so there was a similar issue back during the Obama years, and he slapped a penalty on them, and they fucking shaped up real quick. And then now with Mayor Pete, he hasn't been tough enough on them to really get them to fall in line and stop committing fraud. Bernie proposed a bill, by the way, to try to ameliorate this and give people full refunds and all this stuff. While neither the strike by airport concession workers nor the protests by flight attendants are expected to disrupt air travel this week, they're the latest sign of upheaval in the nation's transportation sector, coming just weeks after rail workers narrowly averted a strike fueled in large part by nationwide labor shortages. So, by the way, I don't think it's actually averted. It's temporarily averted. But I think there's going to be a strike, because the deal was nowhere near good enough. These people wanted like 2 weeks paid time off, and they got like 1 day, maybe, paid time off. So management better come to the table in good faith and negotiate a real deal, or there's going to be a strike that is going to totally mess up the supply chain even more than it already is. So in this instance, workers have leverage, and it's good they have leverage because they can get a better deal out of that leverage, of course. In the airline industry, the airlines and air traffic controllers keep pointing at each other to fend off blame for disruptions as demand for air travel has rebounded. Airlines in particular are struggling to attract workers in a red-hot labor market where less grueling jobs are easier to come by, and federal data shows that airlines are responsible for the high rate of cancellations. The air transportation industry is still down 54,000 workers compared to February 2020. So again, demand has bounced back. They're short 54,000 workers. Lucinda Toe is among the 1,000 workers on strike at San Francisco International, where she has worked for 20 years. She prepares buffets, washes dishes, and clears tables at restaurants and the United Club Lounge for weary travelers. It is draining work that has only gotten harder this year, she said. With inflation at 40-year highs, Toe said she has to work 60 hours a week at 2 food service jobs at the airport for $16.99 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom unit in the Bay Area. Her mortgage is $2,800 a month. Quote, right now, on my wage, I make so little that I couldn't even buy one meal at this airport where hamburgers are $22. Toe said, I need to work 2 jobs to support my family, and I'm always working double shifts. Toe, 61, regularly spends the night in her car at the airport to save on gasoline and pass the time between shifts that stretch late into the night and start early the next day. look, this is why we need a workers' movement in this country that rises up. This is why we need labor unions. Because if you don't have labor unions, management just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and starts making very unreasonable demands. So you need some representation for the worker. And, look, it's not a coincidence that when we had the strongest labor unions in our history in this country, it was called the Golden Age of Economic Expansion, where we had a thriving middle class. Man, this stuff is crazy. The strike at San Francisco International is expected to shut down virtually every food and beverage outlet within the airport. Unite Here Local 2 union leaders said, and the union is urging travelers to bring their own food. The food service workers are employed by more than 30 companies at 84 food and beverage outlets. The San Francisco International Airport advises travelers that a labor action by airport food workers is impacting staffing at restaurants and lounges, said Doug Yankel, a spokesperson for the airport. Some food and beverage outlets are closed while others remain open with limited hours and offerings. Additional protests among food service workers are being planned, union officials said. I mean, look, we're at a breaking point. No pun intended. We're at a breaking point. And the workers need to unionize, rise up, and fight for their rights. Fight for a reasonable schedule. Fight for reasonable pay. In no world should this poor woman have to work 60 hours, sleep in her car, to afford living a decent life. This is crazy. They need to hire more people, too. So anyway, we don't need to go through the rest of this article. You guys get the gist of it. The flight attendants are also striking. But I want to give you more on, look, this shows you how disgusting the system is and how the incentives are broken. Because I'm sure you guys remember some of this from when we were in the heart of the COVID pandemic. Top U.S. airlines plan thousands of layoffs when the CARES Act ban expires. So they say, this is in Truth Out, leading U.S. airlines are warning workers of massive cuts when a provision in the federal airlines bailout prohibiting layoffs expires in September. Congress approved a $25 billion bailout fund for hard-hit airlines earlier this year as part of the $2.2 trillion CARES Act package in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Under the deal, airlines that accepted federal grants agreed not to lay off or furlough workers or cut pay until September 30th. But the country's top airlines are already itching to make major cuts when the ban is lifted. Now, it actually goes a step further than this. They would give people earlier retirement as well. So that was a loophole where they were like, we're not going to fire you, we're not going to furlough you, but how about early retirement? So we're dumping people off. So they got the bailout. One of the conditions was you can't let people go, and then they let people go anyway. A lot of the companies that got bailed out turned around and did fucking stock buybacks, man. That shit is crazy. There is no doubt airlines have been among the hardest hit by the economic shock of the pandemic. The number of people passing through Transportation Security Administration, TSA, checkpoints was down 73% from last year in the first 2 weeks of June. The International Air Transport Association estimated last month that airlines around the world would lose $84 billion this year and see a 50% drop in revenue. American Airlines, which took about $4.1 billion in grants and nearly $6 billion in loans from the government, warned staff in a memo that about 25,000 frontline employees, or about 29% of its U.S. workforce, could be laid off or furloughed in October. CNBC reported. That includes nearly 10,000 flight attendants, 2,500 pilots, and 7,700 maintenance workers. Airlines are required to inform employees of mass layoffs 60 to 90 days ahead of time. CEO Doug Parker and President Robert Issam told employees that June revenue was down more than 80% from last year, and due to rising infections across the country, demand for air travel is slowing again. The memo urged workers to take extended leaves, which can stretch up to 2 years, or accept early retirement packages in order to reduce the number of layoffs. From the time the CARES Act was signed in March, we had a stated goal of avoiding furloughs because we believed demand for air travel would steadily rebound by October 1st as the impact of COVID-19 dissipated. That unfortunately has not been the case. The company has already cut its management and support staff by about 5,000 workers through a mix of involuntary and voluntary layoffs, the outlet reported. The two American Airlines executives said they support a union-led effort to lobby Congress to extend relief and the layoff ban through March 2021 because of the much longer impact of the pandemic than anticipated when the CARES Act was enacted. We are hopeful that we can mitigate the overages and avoid involuntary flight attendant furloughs. They go on to say, United Airlines warned 36,000 frontline workers, or about 38% of its workforce, of potential layoffs and furloughs earlier this month. That includes about 15,000 flight attendants, 2,250 pilots, 11,000 customer service and gate agents, and more than 5,000 maintenance workers. So, look, understand what happened here. During the heart of the COVID pandemic, they were struggling. The government stepped in and bailed them out. Gave them a lot of money, billions of dollars. As a condition of that, they said, you can't just do mass layoffs. So they said, sure. They found loopholes, did the mass layoffs anyway, and pocketed the bailout money. And now we're in a situation where they were bailed out, demand has bounced back for air travel, but they're still massively understaffing. And they're lying to customers along the way and committing fraud. We absolutely need worker power in this country. Look, if I'm keeping it real with you guys, based off everything I've ever read about the airline industry, I have no idea why we don't fucking nationalize the entire damn thing. Because obviously the profit motive in this particular arena has not served the people well. Not at all. Privatization has been a disaster for the airline industry. So look, add this to the list of things that should be nationalized. I mean, a lot of some Scandinavian countries have 50% of their economy is nationalized. We're very low in terms of developed countries, in terms of what percentage of our economy is nationalized. This is one thing we could definitely nationalize, because this is a fucking mess, man. But at least until we get to that point, which who knows if we'll ever get to that point, solidarity with the workers, because they got to switch it up, man. The workers are struggling. The airlines are understaffed. This stuff needs to change and needs to change now. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.